Hey, Renter Retires, it's Adam Schroeder here, and today we have the pleasure of being joined by Majora Carter. She is the author of the new book, Reclaiming Your Community, as well as an urban revitalization specialist. Majora, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background, kind of who you are and how you got started in the whole urban revitalization movement?
Sure. So I'm from a community called the South Bronx, and it took me a while to even get into community development, which started. I was working as an environmental activist and working on developing, transforming dumps into parks. I started one of the country's, first and probably a really successful green collar job training and placement system. But it was clear to me is because we were in a poor community of color. There was a lot of, we were like a repository for a lot of the kind of environmental burdens that happened to communities like ours, poor communities of color. And I really wanted to be a part of a real dedicated change that happened in our communities. And when I realized that there was a huge link between the environmental and then also the economic development of our communities and how it translated to real estate development and wealth creation, that's when I realized that's when I became a real estate developer and really started focusing on our approach to that, which is a talent retention strategy for community development.
Okay. And whenever people hear usually about, bettering a neighborhood or revitalizing a neighborhood, it tends to lead to some people thinking about gentrification. But I'm assuming that's not what you're going for when you're talking about reclaiming your community. So what are some ways that are being done to reclaim communities without, gentrifying the neighborhood? Because we know as real estate investors ourselves, we're looking at, we operate in the turnkey space. So we like revitalizing, rehabbing the properties and making them nice properties for people to live in, which hopefully is bettering the community. But, how do you better a community without going down the rabbit hole of gentrification?
Yeah, I mean, so the kind of communities that I'm most specifically interested in supporting, but through my book and also just my work, that we tend to call them low status communities, and that doesn't mean that there's like the people in the communities are like a horrible status. It's because it could be people from inner cities, it could be Native American reservations, it could be all white towns that actually were part of the Rust Belt and had booming industry and don't have any real jobs anymore. But it's the kind of places where inequality is assumed. People in those communities are led to believe that if they're going to be successful, they need to measure it by how far away they get from those communities. And so for us, the talent retention strategy, which is basically like looking at what are the folks that are born and raised in those communities, the ones that are part of the brain drain that leave those communities and seek their fortunes elsewhere. What are they leaving those communities in order to experience, in order to have? And we realize that it's a lot of lifestyle infrastructure. It's the same things that anybody wants in a great neighborhood. It's the cafes, it's the bars, it's the restaurants, it's the parks, it's the really nice housing that matches their income. And so building those kind of things in those communities that people are led to believe that they're supposed to leave if they're going to create success for their lives, and doing it in those communities gives people an opportunity to actually invest emotionally, but even more importantly, financially in those communities, because we always believe that there's like, in those communities, there's more than just gentrification, the two kinds of real estate development that we see, which is, the gentrification that leads to displacement, or what we call poverty level economic maintenance, which is the kind of, when you see a lot of, concentrated affordable housing, built specifically for very low income bands, or instead of banks or credit unions, you'll see things like check cashing place or payday loan places. Not lots of diverse opportunities for different types of food, but maybe corner stores or bodegas, like we call them here, 99-cent stores, things like that. So we're really trying to, from the inside out, recognize that number one, if you create the right kind of lifestyle infrastructure for talented people in our own communities to want to stay and reinvest, then it's not just gentrification. It's the people that are in those communities actually doing the development.
So how do you convince people, like what kind of things can you do as, or if you're an outside investor looking to get into a community, I know that's not your target audience, but how do you convince people, or how can you look at an area and think, this is a place that we can, maintain the community that's there now.
Right.
And, what are the things you should be looking for, and what are the kind of warning signs that, this neighborhood may not be the best candidate at the moment for revitalizing, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, I don't think there is such a thing, to be honest. I do think that if it's more like what I'm actually advocating for, in this book is for us to recognize that there's all, it's real estate. I mean, that's why anybody gets into it. It's because it goes up eventually. Like you
Yep.
might have to suffer through some stuff for a little while, but basically, you know why you're in it. And so I'm
Nobody's in it to lose money, right?
yeah, I mean, come on, let's just go there. But so what I'm saying is that we need to, for communities where there generally isn't a push in any way, because think about it, billions of philanthropic and government dollars go into communities like this. Tons. So we know that there's these are billion-dollar communities. Of course, the folks that benefit from them are through real estate and every other kind of issue are often not the people that are here. All we're saying is that we need to sort of broaden the idea of who does development within our communities. Some of them actually should be people from our own communities. And I think just historically, thanks to redlining, lack of access to capital, in particular for people of color in our own communities, it's been harder to do that. But, I would like to think that, that as Americans, we're going to start to think about more of the ability for us to really repair the social and economic fabric of this country by making sure that we pay attention to the fact that people from communities, from low status communities, if given the right opportunities, can actually do development for their own communities, both on the housing as well as the local business side as well.
So how, if you go in as a business developer and, build a business that betters the neighborhood, and you would think that that would lead to home prices in general rising and creating an economic crunch on the people who live there, even with the best of intentions. So how do you, are you just thinking that in general it'll raise wages in the area, or how do you do it in a way that doesn't, if you're looking to get in as an investor and generate the wealth there, how do you do it without displacing?
Well, I'm hoping, because it always is the case, that within those communities, there are, local people that own. What often happens, like we've seen in neighborhoods like mine here in the South Bronx, is that there's been a tremendous amount of predatory speculation. Like so much so that I get, calls, and actually a lot of calls, every other day from folks, who represent a group of investors. And they'll say, "Yo, my goodness, your neighborhood's like on the up and up. And, I represent a group of investors. Can we, we'd love to buy your house for cash." And, I'll generally just say, "Oh, well, that's great. I have an asset. I'll bring it to the table. I'd like to join your group of investors, if you know so much about this." And what I'll usually get when I say something like that is a hang up. And so I am just like, I feel like those kind of opportunities that folks have, from the group of investors, some of us already have them, but we're often not led to believe that these are opportunities for us to take, because we're led to believe that our communities have no real value, because we haven't been a part of that real estate trajectory. And, and no one really, I don't think the philanthropic sector, or the definitely not the government sector, has actually looked at these communities as opportunities for people within them to create wealth for their own communities and for their own families. I mean, that's why the wealth gap is as big as it is in this country. So, what we're doing is, I think we're really, frankly, saving America by actually helping to repair the economic fabric in American low status communities, and helping make people be able to pursue that great American dream of home ownership and local economic development through business development as well.
So are you helping people get like small business loans to do this? Are you helping connect people together to kind of create their own fund to create these businesses, or what's the primary way that you're helping people in this
Right.
situation?
Showing them that it's possible. Number one, like we made every single mistake along the way with regard to our ability to be the ones who are uh, going into development. We've developed some small excuse me, not well, that's later. We've developed, some small mixed income buildings within our community as well. And we've also launched businesses, and we've also developed this. Wow, the sun here is just like not. It is just a craziness. But anyway, this is my life. But this is here. I'll put this up because it is really cute. But anyway, it's really bad here. I think so. The sun is like flipping. But anyway, we have developed, but we show that it's possible because no one really expected somebody like me. I'm a girl from the hood, started off as an environmental justice activist. And then I decided that I wanted to be a real estate developer and wanted to show other folks that it's not rocket science. But it does require, I think, mostly a change in attitude. Like, developers can look like me, can look like them. Within our own community. And what's been super exciting is just by my example, I've shown that this is actually a possibility.
Okay. And so you mentioned things like bodegas and those types of businesses coming in there. Are there any, or let's skip that question for a second, but I want to talk about what communities are y'all currently working in to help revitalize?
Yeah, so I've got several projects in my own hometown. Thus, reclaiming your communities is like I practice what I preach. And that's in the South Bronx in New York City. So I launched one of the first lifestyle infrastructure pieces just to sort of prove out this model, which was a cafe called the Boogie Down Grind. And it's an homage to hip hop because the birthplace of hip hop is the South Bronx. And it's become this sort of gathering spot where, folks have, really just poured themselves into and realize that this is a place where you can meet people, you can make deals, really become entrepreneurs on your own just by virtue of being around other folks that are doing this. And then there's also our ability to, and then we also just acquired a building, an old rail station, a former rail station that's an architectural gem. And it was designed by the great American architect, Cass Gilbert, who did the Woolworth building, and we're redeveloping that into an event hall, which will serve, which I'm hoping will become like the best music venue in New York City. It's just also a beautiful building, and we're also working on a redevelopment of a church property into both a parish as well as some mixed income housing and condo developments out in Brooklyn, and also a much larger project in Indianapolis, which is a mixed use light manufacturing as well as local home ownership and some rental as well.
Okay. So now I want to get to the question I was starting to ask before. How do you help people determine what business ventures will actually be successful in their neighborhood? Because obviously not all business ventures are going to work in every neighborhood, but how do you help people kind of narrow down what might be a good way to go?
Yeah. So what I do is more just show the example of what's possible. So we absolutely, have been able to hook people up and just show them through our own, because this is our research and development laboratory. So we've had a chance to like go through all sorts of different types of machinations, some better than others. And so I feel like we've been able to sort of provide that kind of intel to folks, because it's not like I don't run like a school or a program, so to speak, but we just by almost by definition of who we are, as a company, we've been able to sort of show that the possibilities. And so being able to share everything that we've learned, who are some kind of the lenders, or what are the type of programs that could be supportive along your entrepreneurial journey. Those are the type of things. But it's all honestly like the kind of trial and error that we've put into our own business that, I think has helped people along the way. So it's like, lucky me. but that's the whole point. I feel like, it is really each one teach one. And, I have developed, in a way that a lot of folks in my community haven't, or folks that look like me, and and that's why it was such a joy writing this book, because, not only was I able to sort of tell the journey that I made, but also share the journey of others, who have actually gone through this in different ways. And that's the thing. It's not like everything it's not by rote, I mean, it could be, but most of us don't have, an uncle in the business who's going to like give us, our first loan or something like that. And there's different ways that folks are going to help make it happen. And that's been a real exciting part of getting, first of all, this book out, but also, hearing other folks' stories about their journey as well.
So the community businesses that people are building, as you watch the people you've helped and the people you've seen yourself kind of inspire, how have they done in general through the pandemic? Because I mean, it seems like the lower income areas were probably hit really hard by the shutdown and their jobs being put on hold for a while. And so how have they done through the pandemic?
I gotta tell you, I think the ones, at least in my neck of the woods, there are actually quite a few folks that started new businesses during the pandemic because their jobs did shut down. And so that was a strategy for them to just like think about what they wanted to do and then do it. Like there was actually a young woman who I met through the cafe. Her name is Annie Gomez, and she's like launched, actually a line of skincare products, as well as a handbag and hat company, and she's doing really well. And there's folks like Noel Santos, who actually had a project before the pandemic. She wanted to open the first bookstore that we've had in the Bronx in over 5 years. Barnes and Nobles was here. They decided to shut down, and she was a big bibliophile and decided, okay, well, why not me? And did an extensive, crowdfunding, platform, and actually raised a bunch of money to start it. And I got to tell you, the pandemic was actually quite good for her. People were stuck at home and reading a lot, so she's wildly successful. It was tougher for some of the folks that did the kind of things, whether we were restaurants or cafes. For a while, it was hard for us too. But then once outdoor seating came in, we were literally able to triple the size of the amount of people we were able to serve. And that actually helped a lot. And especially since we were able to create more opportunities for things like our ability to, host open mics and art events, right out of doors, again, expanding our space. So I think there were definitely many there, I'm sure there were also some horror stories too, but I was actually really encouraged by the number of people that I learned about who actually, and thank God, survived the pandemic, but also figured out that they actually did have an entrepreneurial hustle as well that they could work on.
Yeah. So, what are the first steps for people as they go through this? I mean, obviously, you're talking about inspiring them to do it, but what's generally the first thing that they have to do to start this process? Like, yeah. So, how do they get started?
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the big groups that I talked about, and actually I'm trying to talk to, in my book, are the local people who, like, especially the ones who have sort of been led to believe that they need to measure success by how far they get away from their community. The first things that we actually try to encourage them to do is, if they do have family property, keep it. Period. Like, that's the first thing you do. Like, literally beware of the the investor groups. And like, I know this is an investor show, but unless you're going to be an investor in your own community, I feel like, why just start there, because that's going to be the way to create more generational wealth and opportunities, for the community, for you as an investor and as a real estate developer to get started. Number one, stay in your family's home if you have it. And if you don't have a family home, talk to people within your community who do have it, and really try to engender an opportunity between them to actually consider selling to you, in case you want to go. Because I think the problem that so many of us have is access to capital. We can never match the kind of speed that a holding company can. we need these crazy things called mortgages, and and that's a hard thing for a bunch of us to have to take on. But I do think that it's a way to kind of level the playing field and create more access to opportunities, and for developers, to really participate, in that economy.
Excellent. Well, Majora Carter, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, people, the book is Reclaiming Your Community. Go out and get it. Pretty much, I assume it's anywhere and everywhere.
It is anywhere you buy your books, although I encourage you to buy local.
Well, hopefully the local bookshop around people is still open after everything that's happened. The
The
website
indie are doing well. I mean, people came out for them, so it's one of the few markets that's actually growing in the book industry. So yeah, hopefully, yeah, they'll be one of them. Thank
Well,
you
the
so
website is majoracartergroup.com. That's majoracartergroup.com. That's MAJORA cartergroup.com. Is there anything else our listeners should know, or any other resources you want to point them to?
Yes. So if you go to my website, for those of you that want to do a reading group, or have an organization that's interested in this approach to talent retention using real estate development, we're making an offer: buy 10 books and by March 1st, and I can zoom into whatever meeting you have in 2020, for this. And I'm happy to do that. Yep. But majoracartergroup.com, and you'll see the offering.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. To all our listeners, you can check us out at renttoretirement.com. That's renttoretirement.com. Majora, really appreciate you spending your time with us and helping educate our listeners. And to everybody else, to all our listeners, please go to your podcast platform and leave us a review. We greatly appreciate it. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much. Take good care.
Thanks for watching the Rent to Retirement YouTube channel. Check out some of our other videos, like this one, or this one here.